Shocking murder reveals Dubai Sheikh's secret affair with Airline Hostess, a tale of betrayal and revenge. Hook, a forbidden affair, a brutal murder, and a deadly chase through the heart of Dubai. What happens when a powerful Sheikh's secrets come to light? Will she survive, or be caught in the shadows forever? Sheikh Farid had always lived a life of opulence and control. Dubai was his kingdom. Every glance he gave commanded respect. But there was a secret, a dangerous affair that was slowly unraveling. Layla, the stewardess, was stunning. Her presence made the air feel thick, heavy. She had the eyes of someone who knew more than she let on. They met often in the shadows, where no one could see. The penthouse, the hidden rooms, secrets exchanged in hushed whispers. Tonight, though, something felt different. There was an eerie silence in the air. The usual comfort of the penthouse was replaced by an unsettling chill. Layla stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. Her expression was unreadable. "You're nervous," Farid said, his voice steady, yet something felt off. She turned to him slowly. Her eyes, once filled with longing, now seemed distant. "Farid, we need to stop." Layla's voice was quiet, but sharp. He moved closer, his hands trembling. He had never seen her like this. "Stop what?" His words were thick with confusion. She sighed, looking away, her gaze lost somewhere in the vast city below. Us. It's too dangerous now." Farid took a step back, disbelief in his eyes. "Dangerous? You've always known the risk." Her voice broke, a fragile edge to it. "I can't anymore. There are people who know, Farid. People who are watching." The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The dim lights of the city below flickered, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, the door slammed open. Farid turned quickly. His heart pounded in his chest. A tall man stepped into the room. Dark eyes glinted, dangerous. "I think you've been keeping secrets, Sheikh," the man said coldly. Layla's face went pale. Farid felt his world shift. Before he could react, the man pulled a gun from beneath his jacket. The cold metal glinted in the low light. Farid's mind raced. He reached for his phone, but the man was quicker. "Not today," he whispered, as the gunshot rang out. Everything went black. The sound of the gunshot echoed in the room. Farid's body jerked, pain blooming through his chest. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, feeling the life drain from him. Layla screamed. Her voice cracked, filled with terror. She rushed to his side, but the man with the gun didn't move. His eyes were cold, emotionless. Layla's trembling hands hovered over Farid's wound, but there was nothing she could do. The blood pooled around him, seeping into the plush carpet. Farid's vision blurred. The world felt distant, unreal. He tried to speak, but the words didn't form. His chest tightened with every breath. The man stepped forward, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. Layla turned to him, desperate. "Why?" she cried out. The man smirked, his lips curling into a cruel grin. "Because, Miss Layla," he said, his voice low, "secrets have a way of coming back." Layla recoiled, as if the words themselves stung. She knew the truth now. This wasn't just about her affair with the Sheikh. It was much bigger. The man looked down at Farid, still kneeling on the floor, his face pale. "This is what happens when you play with fire," the man said, his tone matter-of-fact. Layla's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't think, couldn't move. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling with defiance. The man raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a choice," he said, before turning and walking toward the door. The sound of his footsteps faded into the silence. Farid's breathing slowed, each inhale weaker than the last. Layla pressed her hands against the wound, but it was no use. Tears blurred her vision as she held on to him. "I'm sorry." she whispered, her voice cracking. The Sheikh's eyes flickered, but they were empty now. The life that once burned in them was gone. The city outside was still. The penthouse felt colder now. Layla knew in that moment that everything had changed. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. Layla could barely hear her own breath, the only sound the soft drip of blood pooling beneath Farid. Her fingers were stained with his life. She could still feel his warmth fading, slipping away from her. The fear in her chest tightened, choking her. What now? The door had closed behind the man. She was alone with the Sheikh's lifeless body. Her mind raced. The room felt like it was closing in on her. She had to leave. She had to run before it was too late. But where? The sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Farid's death would not go unnoticed for long. She stood up, her knees unsteady. Her hands shook violently, her mind scrambling to make sense of everything. She looked at Farid one last time, his dark eyes now fixed in a lifeless stare. The man's warning echoed in her head. Secrets have a way of coming back. Layla's pulse quickened. Had the man been talking about more than just the affair? What was Farid involved in? A sudden thought hit her like a punch to the gut. What if the Sheikh had crossed someone far more dangerous than she ever realized? What if her own life was now in danger, too? She stumbled towards the door, but stopped when she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps. She froze, pressing her back against the wall. Her breath caught in her throat. The door opened, and she saw him again, the man from before. But this time there's something different in his eyes. He wasn't leaving. He was here for her. Layla's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would burst from her chest. She had no time to think, only to run. And as the man stepped closer, she did what she could do best. She ran. Layla sprinted down the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Her pulse was deafening in her ears, each beat reminding her how much time she didn't have. She turned the corner, heart racing. She needed to get out, to escape before it was too late. But the building felt like a maze. Every hallway looked the same, every door a dead end. Her breath was shallow, panicked. Behind her, the man's footsteps grew louder, closer. She turned another corner, glancing over her shoulder. Nothing. But she could feel his presence, his gaze on her back, stalking her with deliberate patience. She reached a staircase and hurried down, gripping the railing for balance. The lower levels of the penthouse were even quieter, the silence heavier. Her only company was the sound of her own breath and the distant hum of the city outside. But she couldn't stop. Not now. She had to keep moving. When she reached the ground floor, she pushed through the door leading to the parking garage. The dim lights flickered above her, casting long shadows. Her eyes darted across the rows of cars, searching for an escape. She spotted the black sports car by the far wall. Without thinking, she ran toward it. But as she reached for the door, a voice stopped her in her tracks. "You can't outrun your past, Layla." She froze. The man, his voice was like ice, sending a shiver down her spine. Slowly, she turned around. He stood at the entrance of the garage, blocking the way. He wasn't rushing. He was savoring the moment. "You think you can leave this behind?" His voice was smooth, almost mocking. "You can't. Not now." Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of how little time she had left. She couldn't back down. The thought of being caught, trapped in this nightmare, made her stomach twist. Her hand clenched into a fist at her side. She had to fight. Her breath caught in her throat. The man stepped forward, taking slow, deliberate steps towards her. But Layla wasn't going down without a fight. She glanced around desperately. A set of keys caught her eye, lying on the ground, just a few feet away. The man's eyes followed hers. He was too confident. He thought he had her cornered. In a flash, Layla dove for the keys. Her fingers brushed them just as the man lunged at her. She yanked the keys into her grip, twisting around and sprinting toward the car. The sound of his footsteps grew frantic behind her. She couldn't let him catch her. She wrenched open the car door, slid inside, and slammed it shut. Her hands shook as she fumbled for the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the garage was vast, and the car felt like a small, fragile thing in this endless space. The man was closer now. He reached for the door, but Layla slammed her foot on the gas. The car shot forward, tires screeching against the cold concrete. She sped through the garage, weaving between the columns, the roar of the engine filling her ears. The man's voice echoed behind her, but Layla wasn't looking back anymore. She couldn't. She only had one thought. Escape. The car tore through the garage, the wheels screeching in protest as Layla pushed it to its limits. Her heart hammered in her chest, each second pulling her deeper into the chaos. The man's footsteps were fading now, but she could still feel his presence, like a shadow closing in. She smashed through the exit gate, the heavy metal door crumpling beneath the force of the car. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap in the face. The city of Dubai stretched before her, sprawling and indifferent, the lights twinkling like stars in a vast sky. But she wasn't safe yet. Her eyes flickered to the rear-view mirror. Nothing. No sign of him. For now. Layla gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She drove fast. Faster than she ever had before, as though the road itself could offer her refuge. But her thoughts wouldn't stop. The man, the gunshot, Farid's blood. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. She needed to disappear. She needed to find safety far away from this nightmare. But where could she go? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. A message from an unknown number. Asterisk, you can't run, Layla. You're in deeper than you think. Stop now, or they'll come for you too. Asterisk. Her stomach dropped. Who was this? Was it the man, or someone else? Her mind raced, but there was no time to figure it out. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not after what she had seen. Layla glanced at the dark streets around her. The city was alive, yet she felt utterly alone. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something, someone watching her every move. The message had shaken her, but it had also confirmed her worst fear. She wasn't free. Not yet. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with another message. Asterisk, they will find you, Layla. And when they do, there's nowhere to hide. Asterisk. The words sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to find answers. The Sheikh's death wasn't just a murder. It was the beginning of something far darker. And now Layla was tangled in it. She had no choice but to keep driving, to run from the truth, at least for now. But every mile she put between herself and the penthouse, the deeper she sank into a world of secrets, lies, and danger. The city around her blurred, the lights streaking past like a painting in motion. But in her mind, only one thought remained. Who was coming for her next? Layla's eyes darted from side to side, the streets of Dubai twisting like a maze in her mind. The message haunted her. Who was watching her? Who was really behind Farid's death? The dark, towering buildings felt like they were closing in on her. Every passing car made her tense. Every shadow felt like a trap. She couldn't trust anyone anymore. The road ahead was empty, stretching out into the unknown. But her gut twisted. She wasn't alone. Her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't want to look, but she had no choice. Asterisk, turn off your phone. Now. Asterisk. Her breath caught in her throat. Was it him? Or someone else? Layla glanced at the rearview mirror again. Nothing. But she knew the silence wasn't safe. She swerved the car onto an isolated side street, parking in the shadows. The engine idled as she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. The city around her was eerily quiet now, the usual hum of life swallowed by the tension in the air. Her phone was still in her hand, vibrating. She hesitated. The fear clawing at her chest was overwhelming. But she couldn't stay in the dark forever. With trembling fingers, she switched off her phone. The world felt a little quieter now, but the weight of uncertainty still pressed against her chest. She had no idea what to do next. Layla closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing. She couldn't trust the police. She couldn't trust anyone. Farid had been a sheikh, powerful and untouchable. But now he was gone, and the world that had once shielded him seemed to be closing its doors. She had heard whispers of men like the one who had killed Farid, shadowy figures who operated in the deepest corners of Dubai's underworld, the kind of people who never left loose ends. And Layla was now one of those loose ends. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of footsteps, echoing in the distance. Her blood ran cold. She froze, listening intently. The steps were getting closer. She couldn't stay here. Layla started the car again, her hands gripping the wheel as the engine roared to life. She sped away, back onto the main roads, weaving through the streets with no clear destination in mind. Her only goal was to escape from the past, from the blood that stained her hands, from the man who was hunting her. But the city felt like it was closing in, and every turn she took, every street she sped down, the haunting feeling grew stronger. They were getting closer. She could almost hear their footsteps behind her, like shadows that stretched longer with every passing minute. But Layla refused to stop. She couldn't, not until she found out who was really pulling the strings. And Layla's grip on the steering wheel tightened, her knuckles pale against the dark leather. Her eyes scanned the rearview mirror again. The streets of Dubai had blurred into a dizzying array of lights and shadows, but she could still feel the pressure. Someone was following her. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of her life with the Sheikh, the deadly man with the gun, and now these threatening messages. She had no idea who was truly behind it all, but she could sense their eyes on her. The city felt like a maze now, every street a possible trap. She couldn't go back to the penthouse. She couldn't risk being caught. Layla's phone buzzed once more, and this time her stomach twisted in dread. She knew who it was before she even looked. You can't outrun this. Stop running, Layla. You won't make it far. Her pulse spiked. The voice of the man echoed in her mind, the cold, mocking tone, the certainty in his words. She wasn't even sure if he was still in the city, but the feeling that she was being hunted was inescapable. Layla's thoughts spiraled. Why didn't I just walk away? But it was too late for regrets. She had to survive. The city seemed to close in further as she turned down an unfamiliar street, desperate to find something, anything, that could give her an edge. Then, ahead, a figure appeared in the distance, standing under a street lamp. Her heart skipped a beat. It was too late to turn back now. Layla's foot pressed harder on the gas, her car surging forward. The figure under the street lamp didn't move. As she passed, her eyes locked on the man's face for a brief moment. He was watching her unblinking, almost eerily calm. A chill ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that he knew her, that he knew exactly who she was and what she had done. Layla kept driving, but the unease gnawed at her. Was that a warning? She had to get to a safe place. She couldn't keep running without a plan. There had to be someone who could help her. Her mind flicked to her old friend, Khalid. He had connections in the city, a way to disappear when necessary. He'd helped her once, long ago, and she needed him now. Layla didn't hesitate. She turned the car toward the older part of the city, hoping she could find him before it was too late. The streets grew narrower, darker, the buildings crumbling in places. This part of Dubai felt like a world away from the glittering towers of the city's center. It felt like a place where secrets were buried. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't dare look at it, keeping her focus on the road. But she could feel her heart pounding harder, the weight of the messages pressing down on her. When she finally reached Khalid's building, the quiet, imposing structure loomed ahead. She parked the car, eyes darting around the dark street. There was no sign of anyone following her, at least not yet. With a final glance over her shoulder, Layla stepped out of the car. The chill in the air seemed to bite deeper now. She approached the building, her breath shallow. Khalid's place was tucked away, hidden from prying eyes. She knocked on the door, her heart racing, every moment feeling like an eternity. The door creaked open, and Khalid stood there, his eyes widening in surprise. "Layla," he said, his voice low but urgent. "What's happened?" She didn't have the words. There was no time to explain. "Help me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They're coming for me. I don't know who, but I need to disappear." Khalid's eyes hardened as he looked at her, sensing the fear and desperation in her voice. He stepped aside without hesitation, allowing her to enter. "Come in quickly," he said, his voice clipped, almost cold. Layla didn't need any more urging. She walked inside, her movements frantic, every step weighed down by the heaviness of the situation. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a moment, the world outside felt like it had faded away. Khalid's apartment was small, dimly lit, but it was safe for now. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What happened, Layla? Who's after you?" She shook her head, her breath uneven. I don't know, but they're not going to stop." Her voice cracked. "I saw the man who killed Farid. I don't know who he works for, but they're watching me now. She stopped herself, unsure of what to say next. The weight of her words felt too much, too real. Khalid's gaze softened, just for a moment. "All right, we need to get you out of here. You can't stay on the streets. Not with the people you're dealing with." She nodded, feeling the tiniest bit of relief. "Do you have a place to hide?" she asked, her voice tight. Khalid walked over to a small desk, pulling out a phone and typing quickly. "Give me a few minutes. I'll make a call. But you need to lay low. Stay here, stay quiet. Don't open the door for anyone, understood?" Layla's nerves were still on edge, but she trusted him. "Understood," she said softly. Khalid moved quickly, his every action precise, like he was used to handling situations like this. She watched him, a mixture of gratitude and dread swirling inside her. "What if they find me here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won't," Khalid replied, not looking up from his phone. "I've got people who know how to cover tracks." Layla forced herself to breathe slowly, trying to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger than the Sheikh's death, was closing in on her. A few minutes passed, then Khalid looked up, his eyes hardening. "It's done," he said. "You're going to a safe house. They'll never find you there." A rush of relief flooded through her. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a short nod, but the expression on his face was serious, intense. "Get some sleep, Layla. We leave first thing in the morning." She nodded, but sleep didn't come. Her mind raced through every possibility, every scenario. The man who killed Farid. Who was he really? What had Farid gotten involved in? And why was she dragged into it all? Layla barely noticed the passing hours. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to rest. As dawn began to break outside, the city of Dubai seemed calm, peaceful. But she knew better now. The calm was only temporary. There was nowhere to run forever. And soon, someone would find her. She just didn't know how or when the first light of morning filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across Khalid's small apartment. Layla sat on the edge of the couch, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and questions, but no answers. Khalid had gone silent for most of the night, making calls, sending messages, securing her escape route. His focus never wavered, but there was something in his eyes when he glanced at her. Something that made her wonder if he truly believed she could disappear from this. The weight of her past had caught up with her. There was no turning back. The clock ticked quietly in the corner, each second dragging her deeper into the fear that had settled in her chest. Time was slipping away, and she could feel it. The thought of leaving the apartment, stepping back into the unknown, filled her with dread. But she knew it was her only choice. Khalid entered the room, his expression unreadable. He walked toward her, his movements precise. It's time. Her stomach churned. Where exactly am I going? He paused for a moment, looking her over as if deciding how much to say. A place no one will find you. A safe house off the grid. But once you're there, you have to stay hidden. Don't try to make contact with anyone. Her heart pounded. But what about you? Will you be okay? Khalid's lips tightened. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. But his words didn't reassure her. It was clear that whatever she was running from had its claws deep in the city, and even Khalid seemed unsure of how long he could protect her. She stood up, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had no choice but to trust him. Khalid handed her a small, black duffel bag, and she took it, her fingers brushing his hand briefly. Stay low, he said again. Layla nodded, swallowing hard. She wanted to ask him more about the man, about Farid, but there wasn't time. As they left the apartment, the street outside was quiet, the city still waking up. But she could feel it. The eyes, the watchers, the danger lingering just beyond the horizon. Layla didn't look back. This was her new reality now. A life on the run. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. No matter where she went, the shadows would follow her. That Layla's heart pounded in her chest as she climbed into the back of the black SUV. The door slammed shut behind her, and for a moment, she sat there in silence, the engine's hum the only sound in the empty street. Khalid had told her to trust him, that the safe house was her only chance at survival. But as the vehicle started to move, the weight of her choices began to settle in. She had crossed too many lines, dug herself too deep into a world of secrets and lies. She could feel the past closing in on her, the shadows of betrayal and death never far behind. Her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, watching the city fade into the distance. The towering skyscrapers that had once felt like symbols of power and luxury now seemed distant and cold. Dubai was a city built on facades, but Layla knew better now. Beneath the glittering surface, there was darkness, and she had stepped too far into it. The driver said nothing, his face a mask of indifference as he kept his eyes on the road. Layla sank back into the seat, the weight of exhaustion pulling at her. But sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had no idea where they were going, only that they had to keep moving. Minutes stretched into hours, the landscape around her changing from the urban sprawl to the desolate stretches of desert. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the endless sands. It felt like they were driving into nowhere, away from everything she had known. Eventually, the SUV pulled up to a secluded, weathered building, its stone walls blending seamlessly into the barren desert. This was it, her new reality. Layla stepped out of the vehicle, her feet sinking slightly into the sand as she looked around. It was quiet here. Too quiet. Khalid had given her a chance to disappear, to bury the past, and let the shadows fade into the desert. But Layla knew that nothing in her life would ever truly be erased. There would always be someone watching, someone waiting. The past had a way of catching up. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the horizon, knowing she would never truly be free. Not in this world. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something else. Hope. She stepped forward, toward the safe house. One step at a time, and as the door closed softly behind her, she understood that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward.